Drakeo explained to DJ Vlad that he was charged with first-degree murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder in March 2018.
First-degree murder, conspiracy, 5 attempted murders.
5 attempted murders.
And 2 gun charges.
It would later emerge that in addition to these charges, Drakeo was also being accused of shooting from a motor vehicle, illegal possession of a firearm, and criminal gang conspiracy. It's hard enough fighting a murder charge in 5 attempts, but the use of a gang enhancement, a law that's used to impose harsher punishments on those who commit crimes in furtherance of a gang, would see much more serious punishment for the crimes committed if found guilty. In the case of homicide, this meant that Drakeo was facing, at worst, the death penalty or life in prison. Drakeo was quite literally fighting for his life as a result of his supposed gang affiliations. But let's not forget, Drakeo doesn't claim to belong to a particular gang set. So in this case, the cops positioned the Stink Team as its own LA street gang, with Drakeo being the leader, pointing to the Stink Team, aka the Too Greedy family, as a squad of home invaders made up of members of rolling Crip gangs. Prosecutors said that the Stink Team was a gang with around 20 to 30 members, even pointing out that the Asian-inspired logos that they use are a reference to robbing the homes of Asian people, and a common identifier of the Stink Team as a street gang. Drakeo would later tell DJ Vlad that he felt that the cops were simply trying to make him guilty by association for wild things that his gang-affiliated friends were doing completely separate to him.
We're gonna put these people and make it seem like, well, he's hanging around with him, this is his close friend, they're going around starting problems, shooting at people, whatever they alleging lies that they saying happened. And basically that's how they tried to get the gang charge with the indictment. Well, they indicted us on that charge anyway, so I didn't get that until after the indictment.
Despite the cops' fairly misinformed opinions on Drakeo's gang membership, the case was even more flimsy under the surface. Because one of the most absurd pieces of evidence supposedly proving Drakeo's gang membership was his rivalry with RJ, with court papers citing RJ's affiliation with the Athens Park Bloods and RJ's ongoing competitive rap rivalry with Drakeo as evidence of an ongoing all-out gang war between the two groups, with Drakeo telling Vlad that the cops were trying to use the RJ beef to pin gang affiliations on him.
They didn't have nothing, so I guess they found out about me and RJ getting into it, so they try to pin this together, my rap beef or whatever, a gang murder or whatever they alleging that happened.
The prosecution's entire argument against Drakeo specifically was built on a foundation of sand. Their entire case against Drakeo came from AB telling that prison informant that when they went to that party that night they were looking for RJ, which in the opinion of detectives and prosecutors meant that Drakeo had directed his entire gang to go to that party that night to kill RJ as part of a gang feud, going as far as to claim that Drakeo's lyrics on his Flex freestyle, where he says that he had RJ in the trunk, was an admission of his desire to kill his rivals, even though that song was released after the murder of Red Bull. And even though RJ was an Athens Park Blood, a different gang to the Inglewood family Bloods, which the murdered man Red Bull had belonged to. The prosecutor's case against Drakeo was very flimsy indeed. And to make matters worse for prosecutors, not only was RJ completely unharmed as part of this beef, but there was no evidence to indicate that RJ had ever intended to be at that party where Red Bull ultimately lost his life. Now, RJ would tell Adam22 on No Jumper that he was aware that the cops had told him that Drakeo was trying to line him up, but he outright denied ever having plans to be at the party where Red Bull was killed.
I wasn't supposed to be at that show. I wasn't supposed to be at that show, and nobody...
The show that they're saying that he was sending someone to kill you at or whatever, yeah.
I think I got a lot of love out here, you know what I'm saying, even from my enemies, so... I don't think nobody was trying to kill me.
RJ would also go on social media denying that he ever planned to attend that pajama party where Red Bull died, saying that he had a show elsewhere that night.
I've never been a runner, nor a no-show. Everybody know that ain't never been booked for no damn pajama jam. For one, I had a show somewhere else. Why you didn't cut?
Show me the flyer!
RJ would even go on to say that he was actually a fan of Drakeo, suggesting that their ongoing feud had just been a rap rivalry and by no means a genuine gang war.
I love Drakeo music. That's what people don't even realize. And people be talking all of this beef shit. Bro, it's no beef with me and Drakeo, bro.
So with all of that in mind, much to the bafflement of journalists covering Drakeo's case, prosecutors were still going ahead with the case against Drakeo, specifically going with the narrative that they believed Drakeo had gone to the party that night to kill RJ, arguing that because Drakeo had led the Stinks on a ride, intending to kill RJ, that he should still be held responsible when another unrelated gang member ends up getting murdered by one of his friends for reasons that have nothing to do with him, with Drakeo later trying to unpack the ridiculousness of this line of thinking in a DJ Vlad interview.
I grabbed 12 people to go to a party with me where he's not on a flyer, where in my expensive Mercedes-Benz, along with 5 other cars, to drive to a party to go kill a rapper who wasn't on a flyer, waited there, waited for him to show up, a blood walks by, whatever, somebody else starts shooting randomly. And that I'm responsible for it basically because I start beefs with people and pass out guns and I don't know, I'm John Gotti, I guess.
Whilst awaiting trial, Drakeo was interviewed from jail by Jeff Weiss, the same journalist who wrote that LA Times piece on him days before his arrest. And during the interview, Drakeo claimed that it was 2 specific Monterey Park sheriff detectives named Hardiman and Biddle who were targeting him so specifically, saying that it was these 2 detectives that were bringing an 18-month-old cold case against Drakeo just because of how famous he was getting. With Drakeo questioning the suspicious timing of him being arrested just days after that LA Times article about him was released. Though to be fair, Drakeo did at least admit that these detectives' obsession with him might have something to do with the fact that he'd been taunting them publicly. Drakeo said that these detectives had even gone as far as to get his mother fired from her job, threatening her with conspiracy charges and ultimately leading to her losing her apartment, with Drakeo ending that interview saying definitively he didn't do it. Drakeo would sit in jail for the majority of 2018, with his September 2018 music video for the song Roll Bounce being one of the only things he released during this period. Drakeo would be interviewed again by Dazed in November 2018, telling the world that he was facing life in prison or even the death penalty. He denied having a street beef with RJ once again, saying things were just music between them. He claimed to have never known Red Bull, the man who was killed, ultimately saying that he believed that the police were just using his YouTube and Instagram content against him, seemingly getting no option of bail during his stay in prison, and saying he's just sat in jail making streaming money, so I guess things could be worse. Drakeo was being held at Men's Central Jail in Los Angeles during this period. It's not one of the best places you would want to find yourself, but the sad truth is, things could actually get much worse for Drakeo. Because during his stay in jail the second time, Drakeo claimed to have been subjected to dozens of months of solitary confinement. Because in January 2019, he claimed on Twitter to be quitting music and taking all of his tracks down, blaming Detective Hardiman for the end of his career for trying to use his lyrics against him. But perhaps Drakeo underestimated just how grimy this detective really was, as a result of being publicly shamed for ruining Drakeo's career, because that tweet would end up getting used against him too, as the detectives and prosecutors would make moves to have Drakeo's public statements about them on Twitter as grounds for further punishment, with Drakeo later telling DJ Vlad that he was subjected to months of solitary confinement not for violent behavior, but because of his followers on social media hating on the detective that had built the case against him.
I had put up a post talking about I wanted to take my music down and shit because they were using it against me. They had like 4,000 comments and shit like that. And he went to a judge and got an order basically saying that, and my comments was basically saying f him, his mom, calling him, saying that they want to kill him and all type of weird shit because of my influence and my followers and all this other stuff, that he feels that these threats can be carried out and all this like weird shit, so they took my privileges.
Drakeo's lawyer would come out later to say that his public statements on Twitter, specifically this tweet, is what wound him up in the solitary confinement cell, more specifically, the exact cell that Suge Knight ended up in.
You know, Drakeo was in, general population. I think he was okay. And then he tweeted this, and the detective went to a different judge, not even our judge, and got him placed in solitary confinement in Suge Knight's old cell. And so he's locked down 24 hours a day, except for a couple of breaks where he gets to go out. Like he's, the leader of the Mexican mafia, some large, powerful prison gang, for tweeting, I'm taking my music down and thank Hardiman. And he's remained in there for 8, almost 9 months now.
Drakeo would later tell Andrew Callahan in a podcast that it was around the 10-month mark that his mental health started slipping and he began having hallucinations in his cell alone.
Yeah, it seems like all that time in solitary would probably make you go crazy.
Yeah.
Do you start hallucinating or having
Oh yeah, for sure. Just seeing shit that is not there. I don't know, like shadows, shit like that. Everything was cool to like my 10th month. 10th month and then, I don't know, shit started going left. But yeah, the room started getting smaller. Like shit started, it's crazy.
So you felt the walls start to close in?
Yeah, pretty much. I never knew what that saying meant. I know now, though.
The cops and prosecutors put Drakeo through hell whilst awaiting trial. They used every dirty trick they could to keep him down, but eventually he would have his day in court. Ultimately, Drakeo would emerge from his case victorious. But once again, even with the law seemingly on his side, the powers that be still wanted to play dirty and take Drakeo down. Drakeo had been in jail for well over a year by the time he was finally able to go for trial. It was clear what the prosecutor's strategy was: try and draw flimsy conclusions from Drakeo's public persona as a gangster in his music to paint him as the real leader of a bloodthirsty street gang. But when the facts of the trial came to light, it was clear what had really happened. Drakeo was rolling with friends of various gang affiliations, and just so happened to be there when two of his gang-affiliated friends saw one of their enemies and started shooting. But the cops would throw everything they had at Drakeo to try and paint him and the stink team as guilty of gang activity. Apparently, when it came to trial, prosecutors even called a store clerk from Neiman Marcus to testify against the stink team for regularly spending stolen money in their store and rapping about it. A troll-level reference to Drakeo's earlier lyrics about his ops being so broke that the Neiman Marcus employees don't know who they are. The prosecutors even went further, spectacularly bringing out several Asian men and women, accompanied by foreign language interpreters, asking them one by one if they have ever been to Neiman Marcus in Beverly Hills, with each telling the courts no, they did not authorize the stink team to spend thousands of their stolen dollars on high-end clothing. The cops were really doing everything they could to try and make this case stick to the stink team. And despite the fact that both of the killers in this case, Kells and AB, as well as stink team member 2 Shitty, had all made incriminating statements to undercover informants in jail, a great deal of additional testimony at the trial would come from former stink team member turned snitch, Solo, real name Davian Irving, who would become state witness and testify against the stink team after being the only person positively identified by the police as being at the crime scene. Solo was offered full immunity in exchange for any info about the case, with him going full 6ix9ine, taking the stand and telling the entire story of what happened that night when the stink team ran into Red Bull. Solo broke down the details of that night minute by minute, telling the court that they were at Drakeo's house before the party, but also saying specifically that Drakeo had no idea that the shooting was going to occur. Solo was the perfect witness to convict the real killers, Kells and AB, but the cops wanted Drakeo, and the truth didn't fit in with their narrative. So they would continue to bring up the beef between Drakeo and RJ, and make immense effort to connect the murder of Red Bull to Drakeo's music. And to be fair, they would have a few good leads, because once investigators had determined the guns from the shooting, from both the bullets left at the scene and AB's confession that a 38 and a 40 were used, the cops would eventually find the 40 Glock that they believed had been used in the murder, and in an effort to connect the stink team's alleged crimes to their music, detectives would take a closer look at Drakeo's recent music videos. That's when they found the video to that track Chunky Monkey from a month before the murder, where Drakeo, Kells and Ralphie danced around in gorilla masks and toted guns. The Chunky Monkey music video featured a lot of extreme close-ups of guns. In fact, this music video was so well shot that several of the guns appear on screen with their serial numbers on display in glorious 4K. It was later alleged that a gun featured in the video with its serial number on display was the exact same pistol that had fired the .40 caliber cartridge that was found at the scene. Though to be fair, it was claimed that other people had possessed that gun between the Chunky Monkey music video shoot and the actual murder of Red Bull. Also featured heavily in the Chunky Monkey music video was Drakeo's signature Mercedes SUV that was also seen at the scene of the Red Bull murder. At the time, people were commenting all over that video that everybody included in it is now facing 25 to life. But of course, all of that incrimination was really bad news for Kells and AB, the young shooters who had actually done the crime, with the prosecution's case against Kells looking particularly strong. Not only had he been duly snitched on by himself and his friends to those undercover informants, but the cops also had evidence that following the murder, Kells had posted clips on social media saying that he was sipping on Dead Bull, as well as another clip that was posted on his own Facebook that had a bunch of people in the comments talking very reckless about what had happened to Red Bull. It was clear that Kells and AB were very deeply tied into LA's Crip gang politics. Combine that with the fact that Red Bull was a seemingly beloved Inglewood blood with a deep reputation in the streets, it's not unsurprising then that during the trial against Kells, it was reported that the court was lined with both Bloods and Crips in attendance to show support and pressure respectively, with the heavy Blood and Crip presence on both sides apparently leading to a courthouse brawl where somebody was stabbed during the trial. Things were getting real in the Compton courthouse, but ultimately that wouldn't matter. Drakeo's co-defendant Kells, real name Michael Buchanan, was ultimately convicted of murder and multiple accounts of attempted murder with the gang enhancement, avoiding the death penalty but receiving a full life sentence, with the other shooter AB being under 18 at the time of his trial, and at this point it's unclear whether or not he faced trial privately as a juvenile, with the results not being made public, or perhaps due to delays in the legal system, maybe he's not even gone to trial at all yet. But with all of the evidence against him, you can safely assume he probably got a similar outcome to Kells. Meanwhile, Ralphie the Plug was convicted of second-degree burglary and possession of an assault rifle with a gang enhancement. But of course, the most eagerly anticipated outcome of the whole trial was for Drakeo himself. His trial would last a whopping 8.5 weeks, during which apparently 2 black jurors were removed from the case after expressing concern that the gang evidence used against Drakeo was not accurate. But no matter how many dirty tricks the prosecutors tried to pull against Drakeo, in the end he was victorious. So on July the 25th, 2019, at a Compton courthouse, Drakeo the Ruler would finally be acquitted of murder and attempted murder. He would tweet in celebration, "For everyone that thought I was gonna lose, I won, bitch." But sadly, things were far from over for Drakeo, because despite beating the most serious charges of the case, he was still convicted of felony gun possession by a felon. Meanwhile, 2 other counts of criminal gang conspiracy and shooting from a motor vehicle returned a hung jury. So, even after beating the trial of his life, getting acquitted of murder, and narrowly avoiding the death penalty, Drakeo's life would still be in the hands of prosecutors, who now, embarrassed after being duly battered at trial by Drakeo the Ruler, would now be desperate for a dirty trick that they could use to try and keep Drakeo in jail for as long as possible with no justification.